The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski here. Welcome to another episode of The Stack, where we focus on people, business, and technology. In this week's episode, we are diving into a challenge that every MSP has been faced with at one point or another, and that's data migrations. Whether it's onboarding a new client, handling a M&A, or delivering a digital transformation project, migrations are unavoidable, but they can also be painful unless you've got the right strategy and the right tools. Joining me today, I've got our special guest. We've got Colin Hogg, who is the VP of Sales with Movebot. And there we got Colin. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, I'm great, Dan. It's a delight to be with you again on the Stack. It's awesome to catch up again.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure you're keeping yourself busy.
We're very busy. Yeah, that's been great. Been great. There's lots of stuff going on. So it's very good.
That's awesome. And We've talked about data migration in the past. We've talked about, many different topics as far as how data migration impacts MSPs. And, it's such a critical topic because, much like cybersecurity, data migration is not going anywhere. I mean, we have many MSPs that are dealing with migrations, doing some type of digital transformations, moving from on-prem to the cloud. Or going from the cloud to the cloud, one version to another. And of course, there's also the migrations, not only just general data, but also email data as well, email transformations or migrations, I should say. And I'm sure all of those, use cases, you encounter all of those and more, right?
Absolutely. People are, for all the reasons that you gave in the introduction, people are always looking to move their data, as I say, whether it's an MSP bringing it into the stack, as you say, or a project-related M&A. I was chatting with someone recently at the Casilla Connect conference, and he is an MSP. He works with an M&A client. And literally they say, hey, we've just acquired this company, get their data across. So you're left with he's left in a situation where obviously he has a good relationship with his clients. He wants to get that data across and he wants to make sure he gets it there quickly, safely, and ensure that everything's there. So those are the sorts of things that we're doing.
Absolutely. And before we jump in a little bit further, while many people are very familiar with Movebot, for anybody of our, part of our audience that aren't familiar with it, can you give an overview of Movebot and how you support MSPs?
Sure. So Movebot is really a next-gen data migration tool and email migration tool. So, whether you're wanting to move, your data between platforms, etc. And that's one of the things that we're incredibly good at. We support over 30 different platforms. We're constantly investing in that platform support. So, you can, obviously the big ones, SharePoint, Google, etc., but Dropbox, Box, Ignite, etc. All of these platforms that MSPs will come across, we can, as a tool, it's really easy to use. MSPs can simply come along. We can set them up with an appropriate plan, and then they can run their migrations. They can essentially have one tool that will cover all the migration needs, whether that's data, whether that's email, and we've got some exciting stuff coming a little bit later. So maybe we can talk about that towards the end. But so we're really looking to be a sort of one-stop shop. We give MSPs that a tool that they can reliably use. And we're aware that there's obviously free tools. Sometimes you get what you pay for, and there's a lot of, so having one tool that that you've got reliability you're going to get your
Yeah.
data from A to B. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so the different use cases we talked about, we talked about those new clients, those digital transformations, those mergers and acquisitions. There's a ton of use cases, but regardless of that, what would you say some of those common pitfalls that you see MSPs running into during the migration projects?
So probably one of the biggest ones is, not necessarily knowing what your data looks like, and then how long is this going to take? Sometimes, so often we see, and it might, there could be any number of reasons for it, but you're then set up, you're in a situation where you're time pressured. And it could be that there's licenses are running out, or there's someone's forgotten to actually get this project underway, or you've taken over from something else that hasn't worked. So quite often, the probably one of the biggest things is people getting time pressured, and that obviously increases stress, increases the anxiety in and around doing a migration. So avoiding a key thing that you say, let's just let's maybe try and get this data across a little bit quicker, or a little bit sooner than leaving it for 20 terabytes to be migrated over a weekend, and which is entirely possible depending on the platform, I hasten to add. But sure, it's not the nicest experience, and it's probably not what MSPs actually want to be doing over the weekend. So so a little bit, top tip really is a bit of preparation, really.
I want to I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. So when we talk about, we're talking about the tools and the processes and so on. But if we could take a look at the person or the individual, what are some characteristics of an individual that's best suited to handle data migrations? Because let's face it, not everybody is, it's not everybody in everybody's wheelhouse to do, everything, every type of thing that can be done in an MSP. Data migrations are very unique. They're very critical. If they go awry, can be complete disaster. So, is anybody on the team really best suited for that? Or are there characteristics that you would recommend for somebody on a team that would be best suited?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've not really thought too much about the person as such, but certainly from a characteristics perspective, I think someone that really, because it's a process, it's basically a relatively straightforward process, and when you understand what that process is, then having someone that has the ability to understand how that data is structured in the source and how you want to get that data structured in destination. So that methodical approach and being able to say, we're wanting to get this data for marketing, and the source structure is a flat structure, and you may be going into SharePoint, which is more of a hierarchical structure. So it's a little bit of a sort of understanding that. But methodical going, I want to get this across, and we want to take it to there. And then I'll also understand, people that have done migrations and had the experience understand that things will happen. There will be error. Right. There will be some issues. And when you can see what those are, or when you can understand that they're there and expect that they're going to happen, you don't panic. Quite often we'll see someone that's come along. Maybe they've been literally thrown into this the deep end, and they see some errors and issues, and there's a little bit of panic that sort of sets in, because now how do I fix this? How do I rectify these? Right. In most instances, rerunning the the migration solves the problem. But yeah, you just, I guess, that calm, collected, in terms of coming back to the characteristics, calm, corrected, methodical approach, and just understanding that it's a cloud environment, and sometimes things happen, sometimes things will go wrong. Expect that to happen. Know what your rectification methods are, and the other thing that's probably a really critical element in the migration, whether it's the engineer doing the migration or whether it's the team doing the change management, potentially with the end client, is some really clear communication and setting those expectations. So, yeah, a good communicator that essentially is methodical and a broader view, I think, is probably a fair set of characteristics that it would be nice for when people do migration.
Yeah. No, I think those are great points. And like I said, it was just a question that came out of thin air. As we're talking, I was thinking about, that human element and the human side. And, I think those are some great points as far as, the type of person. But, even in the case where someone may not have done a lot of experience or has a lot of experience doing data migrations, having the right tool, based on our discussions, as far as how Movebot is set up, it does make it easy really for, a variety of people to be able to do that. But one of the things that you've talked about in the past is Movebot support, that you guys are more than just a tool, that you're ultimately a service as well, and that you have, team members available. So if somebody does run into a challenge, you guys have people available to assist, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And when a new MSP comes on board, or even a new team member comes on board, we invite them. We try and set up an onboarding call, and usually that's setting up their first migration and taking them through the product. And then people forget things, and the team's here, and they'll jump on a call, take people through, answer the questions. And basically, it's also our feedback loop for the product as well. So it's a really we like talking to people. So we what we hear on these calls and these authentic conversations that we're having is like, okay, actually maybe there's something we can do in the tool to make that better, and that actually that's a feedback loop that goes back into the product. So if we had that problem or if we see this as a recurring issue or something that's happening, we can potentially engineer that out and then relieve that problem. So it makes, again, just making life easier, making the tool so much more useful for the people doing the migration. But yeah, we're fundamentally here to help. We're also in the middle of creating some training material for MSPs, and that will be available exclusively for MSPs. So Chris, who you've met previously, he's collating that and putting together a series of videos. So we'll hopefully be launching that shortly. So again, that will help with that sort of onboarding of clients, onboarding of MSPs, and talking through some of the tips and tricks and so on that you can utilize in the tool to get a successful migration.
Talking to MSPs, whether it be as I'm out and about traveling or just MSPs that are on our weekly calls, one of the biggest fears that's brought up by MSPs and also, of course, their clients is missing data in a migration. And that's the last thing that we want to see for our clients, and obviously the last thing the clients want to see. So how can MSPs ensure that the data has been properly transferred over? And if there is something missing, how can they identify it before it becomes a problem for their client?
Yeah. So there's a number of things that you can do. First and foremost, you scan. We provide a free scan of the source environment, so you will know, or we will actually flag up in advance if there's any error issues. It might be file path names too long for SharePoint,
Yeah.
etc. So there's the prevention element of let's make sure we can see these errors. This file hasn't been found. It might be we can't actually. There isn't permissions on that. So rather than it just going straight into running a migration, you can then say, okay, well, I've got permissions issue. The user that has the connection set up doesn't actually have permission to view that file. So I can correct that in the source, and then when we go to move that file, we're actually able to lift and copy and paste essentially that into the destination. So that's the first thing, is really making sure that you see in advance, tackle any issues that you can do from that scan, and then you push and go. The data will come across, but there may well be some errors or issues, and they're possibly, depending on the platforms and connections, etc., there may well be some files that have not migrated or not come across. So within our interface, we're very transparent. And to some extent, sometimes I mentioned that we talked a little bit about that panic that sometimes you see people with. If it's that new user, they go, no, we've got all these errors or issues. We surface those. So we surface those to make sure that first of all, the MSP knows exactly what has moved, what hasn't moved. Often, and in 99% of the cases, we simply have a button that says rerun those failures. And basically what we do is we then just go and say, we'll check this file and only do it for that file. Check this file, bring it across, and that invariably solves that problem and solves 99% of those issues. If that doesn't work, then we can run a delta. And then the delta scans the source, scans the destination, brings the latest mod time across, and pretty much that solves that problem. So the key element in there is we actually surface all those elements. We have full transparency. So from a confidence perspective, once you've done all that, once you've gone through all that process, we actually have a set of reports that the MSP can download, stick in notes, which will actually confirm that we have moved the data from this point to this point. And it's got in there. So not only you can see this in the interface, but we actually have a set of downloadable reports that you can keep in the file, supply to the client. We always recommend that people do that, and then you've got that traceability element as well.
Yeah, no, I think that report's great to be able to add to the ticket, for that project. Just the good old CYA, because of course, no matter what we do, no matter how right we do things, you never know if a question comes up by a client. And, it's always be able to go back to a report like that, just from a verification perspective and just accountability as well. And one of the other things too is, we do know that for our audience, for many MSPs, that Microsoft ecosystems dominate. And, so when we take a look at that, are there any unique issues that they should be aware of when it comes to migrating into SharePoint, especially if they're going from, maybe Google Workspace as an example?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I recently attended the M365 con a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas. And interestingly enough, there was a lot of conversation, there was a lot of migrations were absolutely top of mind for a lot of people, but one of those was this, the perceived complexity of a migration from Google into 365. One of the, I guess people, yeah. So when you're doing that, things to be, concerned with, probably one of the things in the destination is rate limiting and how quickly you want to get that data across. So there are things that you can do to mitigate that. And, because the rate limiting also just affects that how also how quickly you can do it, but reliability, if you like, and if you're up against the timeline. So we want to try and mitigate that. So what you can do there is just ensure that we're not running, there's no other migration tools running on the instance, there's on the tenant, because obviously Microsoft tenant, the rate limiting is per tenant. So if the tenant is under load from other aspects, a backup tool running, sometimes another migration tool has been running, we want to make sure that they're not running, and then that will ensure that we can get that data across. But coming out of Google structure and what Google allows in terms of file names, long file path names, characters in file names, Google Docs. Google Docs don't exist in any other platform, Microsoft or otherwise.
Right.
So, from a tool perspective, you want to make sure that we're doing some file name sanitization. So that's one of the things. So if there's an illegal character that's not allowed in the destination, and SharePoint is a great example, then we will sanitize that. So we will take that, and that's done automatically in the tool. We can detail all that. Again, if you want to know what all of those things, it's all reported, so that's fully transparent there. But the key thing is you don't have to do it. You don't have to think about it. The migration isn't going to fail. The data is going to go across there, and you're going to know that you've got the data into the destinations. But I made with that file name sanitization.
Okay.
Doc type conversion. So we can basically via the Google API, we download those docs and we'll convert them into a Microsoft format. And so when they appear in the destination, they will appear with obviously correct file name, but in a Microsoft format, an Excel, a Word, PowerPoint, etc. So we'll do that. There is one gotcha on that, and it's something people should be aware of. If that Google's API's limit on that maximum file size is 11 meg. So if there's a file larger than that, we won't be able to do that. But again, we'll report on. We will tell you that that's there.
Yeah.
So that's something you can do manually. And the other thing that's probably most common in a Google to 365 migration is Google is probably the only platform, and I think they've changed this now, but historic, there's a lot of historic data that you're potentially moving. Google's one of the only platforms that you can have the same file name and folder name, but multiple files and folders. So I can have, Dan and Colin 1, Dan and Colin, Dan and Colin, Dan and Colin, Dan and Colin.
Right.
All of those files could have, probably will have different content in it. It's usually that's been
right.
My mistake, not something that delivery. So what we will do is we will deduplicate that. So when we see that that file name is there's multiple files of the same file name, we will just add an append, say dupe 1, dupe 2, dupe 3, dupe 4.
Okay.
That deduplication is, and again, you're still getting all that data across, and the user can make those changes, but their files have actually come across, their data's come across. So that's in terms of sanitizing, if you like, the craziness that you can have in Google to the structure that you're looking for in in SharePoint is absolutely critical. And then there's the other thing of in Google, there's certainly in terms of shared drives and so on, and the number of files, folders, etc. You can start with a tool. You can get incredibly granular. You can say, I actually only want these selected files from here.
Okay.
And this is kind of going from this flat structure to the hierarchical structure. So you have that that ability to be incredibly granular. Say, I actually don't want this whole marketing folder to go into a marketing SharePoint site. I want to split this up into different departments or whatever it might be.
Right.
So you can be incredibly selective about how you bring that data across. And of course, the tool's smart enough to know that we've got data mapped in this transfer. And even if you were to make a mistake, if you've already brought that data across into another destination, we're not going to bring it across again. It's hang on, you've mapped this before and you've got the data elsewhere. So that whole that structural thing, from a flat structure to hierarchical structures, and having that flexibility to be granular, makes life easier for that Google Workspace to 365 migration. Sorry, it was a very long answer.
No, it's good. I mean, and the thing is, it's, it obviously is very in depth. I mean, going from a Google platform to Microsoft, and especially, those similar file names, not similar, but same file names. Clearly that's just a no-go in the Microsoft world. And, so we've talked about, of course, the technical side. We've talked about the human side, or, the people side, but let's talk about the business side. So migrations are often viewed as a necessary evil. It can be costly and time consuming. So how does Movebot help an MSP succeed with the migrations, but to do so in a profitable way?
So what we've been doing with a number of MSPs is we'll talk to them, we will set up we will give them essentially flat fee pricing. So basically a monthly subscription, and we right size it for, fair's fair basically, but we right size that with the MSP. But what that means is they can pick up a tool. They don't have to think about what the cost is. There's no complex licensing to think about. They can run essentially unlimited mail migrations. They can run unlimited data migrations, all for a fixed fee. So whether they come along and they've just onboarded clients into their stack and they're bringing those across, and that's their typical use in the year, we'll construct a subscription for the MSP that suits. Or, they get these occasional projects that come along, and rather than having to stop and think, it's actually pretty much already paid for. The MSP then can build in what their services and that whole project related things. And it essentially means that rather than shying away from projects, you can, certainly in terms of data migration projects, you can tackle it and know that you've got, you essentially have a fixed fee regardless of what you're going to do.
Right.
So from a financial perspective and actually making a profit at the end of the day, profit is the lifeblood that we all live on. The MSPs can have absolute confidence that they've got essentially a fixed price regardless of that migration size. So that's one of the things that we've done exclusively for MSPs.
Awesome. And so before we wrap things up, I know you've got a special offer for our listeners. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So I think we're going to post the links, Dan. But we have an exclusive offer here, which will give MSPs a terabyte of data. So for new MSPs wanting to come along, test us out. If you go to the movebot.io, everything MSP, exclusive on the ticker at the bottom there, fill out the form, let us know. We'll give you a terabyte of data. We'll, jump on a call with you, onboard you, and, give you that confidence that so you can use the tool for your migrations.
That's excellent. It's a great way to test the waters and experience the platform for yourself. I also know that you guys have some new features, ultimately coming out. Can you give us a little bit of an update about something in the pipeline?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we've had a lot of, I mentioned that we do listen to MSPs and what they're asking us. one of the key things of late has been Teams migrations. So whilst it's a developing thing, the Teams APIs and so on are developing all the time. So there's nothing sort of absolutely constant in there. But we've been asked, particularly in SharePoint to SharePoint migrations, to do the Teams migration. So the development team here have been working on it. It's probably about a month away, I think, but it's a good opportunity in this podcast to let the community know that that functionality to do Teams chat to Teams chat, and I think we're covering off the private folders and private chats and so on in there as well. But it will be released in beta probably in the next month or so. So that's something to keep an eye out.
Excellent. Colin, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights today. For any of our listeners thinking about tackling a migration project, be sure to check out Movebot. There is the link there where you can sign up for the special offer and take advantage of that. Again, Colin, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Dan, thank you. It was always a pleasure. I look forward to connecting again soon.
Sounds good. And for everybody out there listening, until next time, keep stacking the odds in your favor. This has been The Stack, and we'll talk with you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.